Project CBD, from our vantage point, dealing a lot with doctors and scientists in particular, but also with patients and dispensaries and the whole situation in Northern California. You know, given what we know THC and CBD complement and synergize, then it makes sense that you should look for something that products that have both. And given the fact that you know, the more they're there, I mean, a 1-to-1 ratio between them, equal amount, is going to have more synergy than something that's almost all one and very little of the other. There'll be less synergy. That's not to say that latter is a bad configuration. It's just what it is. So the idea is to find some kind of a product or a remedy that has that's CBD rich, that has as much THC as a person is comfortable with, and that might vary from person to person. And I'll show you something that we have in California about that in a moment. So patients have options, at least in California, but I say this now because this is where you're headed. And people put down California a lot, you know, the naysayers about medical marijuana. Oh, we don't want it to be like California. We have to have real rules and everything, you know. And California has suffered from a lack of regulation in some ways, but it's also benefited from it. And there's been a great, I call it a laboratory experiment in democracy with respect to cannabis therapeutics, particularly in California, that has unfolded, and it's a remarkable phenomenon. And we've learned a lot at the grassroots level, so that the scientists come to Project CBD now and ask us what's going on with this or that. You know, it's funny, because we used to go to them and share the information, and now we share the information with the scientists too. So it's exciting in that way. Okay, so here's a bit of what we learned. There's no single CBD-THC ratio and dosage that's right for everybody. That you do have the option of healing without the high if you're a cannabis patient, or you will very soon in Hawaii. But that's not to say that a low THC remedy, while it's not intoxicating, it won't make you euphoric or dysphoric if that's the issue, but that doesn't mean a low THC remedy is necessarily the best treatment for people. It might be the treatment that a person can tolerate and benefit from without making them uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean it's the most effective. But it should help. It's not a question of, you know, the perfect ratio or dosage for a condition. Just at this point, well, what is it a person can comfortably take in? And if you're taking in both THC and CBD, you're probably helping yourself. And I know I'm painting with a very broad brush, and you can get much more specific. Maybe we'll do that in the next slide. Okay. Oh, we're creeping up that way pretty soon. Personalized medicine, the cannabis therapeutics, is very personalized. Person's sensitivity to THC is a key factor in determining what ratio or dosage of a CBD-rich medicine to take. For some people aren't bothered at all by THC. They really like it. No problem. Then it's not an issue. But for many people, that's not the case. So patients can adjust the psychoactive effects by adjusting ratio and dosage. And for cannabis-naive patients, for new patients to the cannabis world, best to start with low doses of a low THC remedy and increase incrementally, either the ratio change it, increase the THC amount, or increase the amount that you're taking. Okay, and here we have an example in California of just what I'm talking about. And I say this with full disclosure. This is the Care by Design product line's sublingual sprays. And you can see it has 5 different ratios. You see the piece of the pie. When it's colored in, it's CBD. When it's white, it's THC. And you see it goes from blue, where it's almost all CBD, an 18-to-1 ratio, to the red, where it's 1-to-1, half and half, incrementally creeping up. It's sublingual spray. They know exactly how much you get in each spray. So this is what we have in California, and full disclosure, I was a consultant to conceptualize the product line of that product for that group. And I'm saying it not because I'm here to push that product. You can't get it here. That's one of the that's the problems with prohibition and the ongoing situation. In California, we can't export our products that we make in California. It's a huge market in California, so if you do, you know, if you've got a good product, you're okay. But it's not like you can go and sell this in Hawaii or Washington or Oregon. Not legally, you can't. And at this point, people are really squeaky clean about being legal in California, because finally, after 20 years, the state government is behind the industry. and supporting it. This is a big change just within the last year. And they seem to be very fond of this company in particular. But I just say this as an example. You can go to a good dispensary in California, many different product makers, many different ratios, many different ways to experiment, and hopefully under a doctor's supervision or with a doctor's guidance. Okay, dosage. These are just examples of some of what we're seeing and with kinds of conditions and how it relates to ratios, because it's our main focus really is we tell people just find something that you're comfortable with. Don't worry about the exact ratio. Just worry about it feeling all right for you. And hey, look at the bird. Anyway, but we do see patterns of what seems in groups of grouped in terms of conditions, where you can speak in somewhat general terms. That's great. About, for example, depression, generally low doses of cannabinoids, and CBD is for many reasons very good for depression. Also for anxiety, CBD comes up very strong, and there's been some very interesting clinical studies in other countries on CBD and social anxiety, but general anxiety. So some of the things we see, autism, one-to-one, more THC, it's neurological. THC is more direct hit on those receptors. It's when you're dealing with neurological conditions, we shouldn't get into this bag of, well, CBD is the medical part and THC is sort of, it kind of goes along for the ride. It's really not. They're both super important, and THC is a remarkably powerful medicine in many ways. So for almost any autoimmune disease, and that's a big category of many conditions, almost any marijuana should be helpful. And the reason I say this is because, and when I say almost any marijuana, we're mainly talking about the THC, the stony stuff that you get that will be easiest to get in the dispensary. The THC binds to the CB2 receptor in the periphery, and that receptor regulates immune function. And when something binds to it, it makes it's an immunomodulator. It actually dials back immune function. And when you have an autoimmune disease, you have an overactive immune function that is, overreacting to something that you get the gist. So if you have something that can dial back that inflammation, that overactive immune system, which THC is super effective in, that means weed, in theory, should be helpful. Now, again, then this question, does a person like getting high or not? And that's going to be a big factor on, what ultimately they might reach for, or what's settled in. Okay, so moving, I think, let's break for questions, because